Oh my gosh, I found a bunch of new videos
Oh, good.
when we went to Disneyland.
Which time?
First time with Savannah, Boston, and
Second
Brooklyn.
time.
Yeah. And I found videos of the girls when they won their first triathlon, the fit kids.
Is that the one where Camden ran
on the beach?
The triathlon?
Yeah.
He ran the swim, he ran the bike, and then he ran the run.
Yep. He was just a runner. I think it was Boston, not Cam.
No, that was Cam that did that.
I don't think so.
When we did the fit kids up in Highland.
I'll show you. It's awesome. It is great.
Because Boston was beating him and he could stand up in the lake. So he stood up and ran.
It's pretty good. You're going to laugh when you see this. They're so teeny. It's hard to comprehend how much growth has happened with our own children while on this team.
Yeah.
They were just little wee things.
I think, Camden was only not even a year old when we started this.
It's pretty funny.
He's getting close to a 12.
Well, Brooklyn won first in her little age group. And she's like, how did I do that? That's pretty funny. All right, let's get down to business, shall we? Listeners, viewers, and everybody in between, welcome to One-on-One Live with Coach Blu. It's good to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate you downloading, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast. One-on-One Live is hosted by me and our athletic director, Marissa. How you doing today?
Great.
Yeah, feeling it?
To be here.
Been busy, haven't you?
Yeah, I just barely sat down for
so much stuff going on. But yeah, this is our weekly call-in show. This is an opportunity for you to jump on, maybe ask some questions. We have some questions that have been submitted. And if you submit a question and we don't read it on the air, don't answer it on the air, we will do our best to get you an answer, whether, through instant messaging, so on or so forth.
Yes.
So that being said, before we get rocking and rolling, any announcements that we have that we want this team to be aware of?
We have a new race coming up here in June. We'll be posting about it shortly here in Utah County, a team half marathon. So please get it on your calendars.
It's going to be
June
great.
25th.
It's going to be great. And there's going to be lots of fun stuff associated with that one. And Addict Athlete, we've got quite an agenda this year.
Yes, we do.
We've got like anniversary parties coming up in May. We've got 4th of July celebrations coming up in July.
Yeah.
Racing out the gills and everything in between.
In fact, I had the Village Run. Remember our old Village Run people?
Mm-hmm.
Reach out to me yesterday asking if we could have athletes come and volunteer at that race.
Oh, perfect.
Next month. So I sent it to Jed. If anyone's interested, that's an awesome 5K raising money for foster care kids who are aging out of foster care. And it's a fun one.
It is. It's got strong purpose. That's one of those races that we've kind of done year after year because of Terry Sawyer, whom I just found out today is our 10-year friendiversary on Facebook. So that was kind of funny. But Terry Sawyer, working for the Department of Family Services, she started that run with a few of her colleagues, and we've kind of participated in it simply because of the cause.
Yeah.
And Addict Athlete typically tries to do our best to attend at least one non-for-profit run each month, kind of that symbolic giving back to our community.
Yep.
So kind of a cool thing. And because of that, we've established some pretty good relationships with those people. But Marissa, I want to give a shout out to our Patreon fans, our Patreon supporters. These are they who believe in the podcast, who believe in the efforts that we're doing here on Team Addict Athlete. And it's a little bit of an investment because they get something back in return. It's not just a donation, which we totally appreciate. This is like they get something in return. And right now it's a lot of dosing of the extracurricular recovery playbook. You're getting first look at it. This is going to be a aspect of our online program. And you guys get to take the first go at it. So thank you for all the feedback you've been giving me. Thank you so much for those who are really jumping in and diving into it, because you're also kind of the testers of it. So thank you all so much. But I want to give a special shout out and thanks to our super fans. They include Jerem living in Brazil, Thurston. I'm still jealous about that, man.
But now I think he changed his name to Chillin' in Brazil.
Chillin' in Brazil, Thurston. That's awesome. Tracy Whitby, Holly Davies, Scott Foster, the Foster family. Thank you guys so much. Coach Chris Williams, Brett Frew, Coach Tara Butson, Steve Riggs, and of course, the Warrior Within podcast and personal development by Sensei KP. Also a sister podcast here on the Radio Rona Network. So Good job, guys. Our rookie level subscribers. Thank you so much. Kenny Roseman, Sherry Polson out there on the road, delivering all your packages, guys. You better give her a shout out and thanks when you see her.
One of our resident UPS drivers.
Absolutely. Earl Dyer and Mary Innick. I think that those are rookie levels who really kind of put in the effort there.
Yeah,
I love them all. Thank you so much. Our pro level subscriber. Thanks so much, Gary Thurston. We need some more pro level subscribers. Yeah. Gary's all alone there.
My dad's alone.
Yep.
Come be a pro.
Come be a pro. Our championship level subscribers. Thanks so much, Shad and Freya Robinson and the Robinson family and Ron and Dee Loesch. Thank you all so much. It helps significantly. If you want to become a part of the Patreon team, jump on patreon.com/addicttoathlete and you'll find all kinds of tiers with all kinds of, accruing perks and special offers. And we're about ready to send out our next dose of t-shirts, right?
Yep.
So we got Josh Hansen working on it for us. We're going to be debuting that. So this will be the second round of t-shirts, stickers, all that fun stuff that shows that you are part of the Patreon family. So thank you all so much.
Yes.
Okay. Marissa, so much to talk about. Lots of questions. There's been a little bit of discussion you and I have been having recently, specifically about family relationships, husbands, wives, families in recovery. Mm-hmm. Whenever someone gets kind of, blindsided by addiction and a family system goes through the healing process, it's a difficult challenge because there's a lot of different moving parts and there's a lot of different language and there's a lot of different viewpoints. And the healing process can definitely take a hit.
Oh, yeah.
And so you and I have been talking a little bit about this, specifically about, how, and this is a question too that we received, which kind of got me thinking about it, which is, how does a family involve themselves within the recovery process without feeling as though it is like an extra burden? Because it's going to be, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
Right. And I think when we see that there's maybe one spouse that has the issue or the addiction, or there's multiple family members in there, the level of stress definitely increases, but there's a lot that can be done. And the process of healing, I think, truly is where a lot of love can be reestablished, a lot of like faith can take its hold, and just a lot of connection. It's funny because when you boil down to the things that you'll lose in an addiction, people will lose houses, they'll lose cars, they'll lose jobs, they'll lose, these things that are significant.
Money.
But when we lose people, relationships, and I'm not saying lose them to death, but I'm saying lose them to them being fed up or enough is enough, or
family members say we're done.
Yeah.
We're cutting you out.
That is the most challenging thing for people to overcome because addiction is a relationship breaker. Mm-hmm. Healing and recovery is a relationship like bonder. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of an interesting concept when we start looking at what really matters, and it's relationships. We found this in the healing process on Team Addict Athlete. It's the relationships that truly make this team valuable.
Oh, yeah.
So relationships are typically the most sensitive topic in recovery. And a lot of programs don't do a lot of good in-depth work with the family system. They work with the person who has the problem, and the family kind of come in a little bit second.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of miscommunication as to that healing process and whatnot. And so yesterday I was touching base with you on a topic that I thought was interesting. And this is during any kind of addiction or any kind of issue that family systems struggle with. The head of the family system, husband, mm-hmm. wives, partners, what have you, we've got to be able to have that be the focal point of the healing process.
Oh, yeah.
Because so much is lost. Trust is lost. Faith is lost. Love is lost. There's all these things. The building of the foundation back into relationship starts coming with trust, right?
Yeah.
And trust we've talked about is not really earned as much as it is a gift. Let's start with this. So I think the reestablishing of trust is crucial. Why do you think, as a Eric Erickson stage of development, it's the very first thing we develop as infants, 0 to 1, trust versus mistrust. Why is that so crucial in recovery?
Because that's the basis of everything. That's how we learn to trust ourselves, trust others, trust the world around us, our environment, so that we can get to the point that we can interact with other people and have, and our environment. Like it has to start there.
I think so. It's interesting too, because a lot of people come into treatment and they'll say things like, I don't trust anyone.
Yeah.
That's funny because that's not true, right? I mean, there's a lot of trust that we give to people, situations, and things that we may not even realize, right?
Every day.
Think about that. Like how many acts of trust did you have today in the the 5 or 6 hours that you've been moving and grooving and going?
Yep.
People driving next to you.
Yep. From sitting down on the chair upstairs at breakfast. You know, I'm trusting that it was put together correctly, that the screws are in, that it'll hold me up, you know.
The breakfast that you're eating.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The cars that are driving next to you on the freeway, all these things. We do a lot of blind trust.
Absolutely.
So when someone says, I don't trust anybody, that's usually kind of that wall of defense. Mm-hmm. But what they're really saying is there are specific people for specific reasons that I have a hard time connecting with.
Yeah.
The mistrust and trust, it's interesting. How do we start reestablishing those relationships through trust? I mean, what is it? Because like you said, it's not earned.
Yeah.
You can't have a path of good deed, and just increase the trust increments, right? Because eventually what's going to happen? Someone's going to have to gift it to you.
When they're ready.
Yeah. Like here is my trust. Please be very careful with it.
Yeah.
And if they fumble it, if they drop it, if they don't take it serious, what can you do? Take it back.
Away.
Absolutely. But if you're trying to earn trust and something small or wacky happens, and they're like, wait a minute, I have done all this work, but
I did one thing.
It's gone. I have to start over. That usually ends up in hopelessness.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting thing. And I think if we can kind of conceptualize that, but trust starts to bleed into other areas of life. And the one thing I've noticed is that there's this disconnect emotionally. Emotions they're challenging at best because there's such a variety of them. If I asked you to even define love, could you?
It's difficult.
It's difficult because there's so many attributes.
And everybody feels it, experiences it differently.
Absolutely. So the one concept of this that I really want to take a deep dive in, that I think this listener's asking too, is how to develop emotional intimacy back into a relationship after there's been such chaotic turbulence in the addiction.
Yeah.
What is, in your mind's eye, what is emotional intimacy? I've looked at it in a few different angles, but how would you describe it?
I believe emotional intimacy is being able to have an open, honest relationship with someone, being able to share, you know, your deepest worries, fears, concerns, but also your dreams, hopes. Like it's being able to talk to, you know, and share those experiences with each other and your, you know, things that you're afraid of, and being able to talk about it openly.
I like it. How do you like this? Emotional intimacy is the closeness that you experience when you feel supported in exploring personal growth in a safe manner to share your authentic emotions. At the same time, being able to share those emotions through any kind of physicality, any kind of spirituality, that relationship-based like foundation. It's important to talk about emotional intimacy within a relationship because it really does strengthen and provide some health to it. So if there's not emotional safety in a home, how in the world can you develop emotional intimacy?
You can't.
So for you listeners out there, the term like emotional safety is kind of an interesting thing. And I'm not talking about like, you know, the woke movement of like everyone's feelings, and this might sound funny and silly, but everyone's feelings matter. But what I'm talking about is in your home, as you develop your home team and you try to establish home court advantage, emotional safety is one of the biggest things. Yeah. I was watching a funny video yesterday on YouTube, and it was, you know, Heavy D Sparks. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Diesel Brothers. And Diesel Brothers. Yeah. And it was interesting because, you know, I didn't think I would be like captivated by them digging out a tractor from mud. But it really wasn't that captivated me. It was the leadership and the integrity of the two guys. And it was funny because although the one gentleman, I think is kind of like over the whole squad. Yeah. He doesn't make all the decisions. Like he stops and he listens to everyone's point of view. And he doesn't like, it's my way or the highway. a commenter wrote a little comment underneath that pointed that out. And I'm like, that is exactly why I like watching this. It has nothing to do with the content. It's the way that
they work together well in these. Yeah, they do a lot of difficult, things. And, they were the team that helped search for Susan Powell just recently and out in a mine for more than 10 days. And it was really cool to see how they all worked together when things went wrong, how they fixed it, what they did, it was cool.
So I was looking at that and I'm like, it's an emotionally safe environment to have an idea. So think about that in your own home, right? And I remember talking about this. I probably talked about it quite a few times, but there was a time I went to a relative's house of mine and I walked into the home and they were all doing busy things, very loud, very like in their own worlds, trying to work together, but very much not. And I remember thinking, if any one of these people had an issue that they needed to talk about, it would never be heard.
Yeah.
The emotional safety just wasn't there. The house was kind of disheveled. The music was loud. There was yelling, and I thought, there's no way that anyone would notice a family member struggling here.
Yeah,
because the emotional safety is non-existent. So you cannot build emotional intimacy if the foundation of emotional safety isn't present.
Yeah.
How do we create emotional safety? I think we can only measure against kind of what we try to do here in our own home.
Yeah.
But what are some of the things that we do to like really establish that emotional safe environment so that our kids and even us can address heavy issues?
Well, I think it's two ways. Like you were saying, it's knowing and understanding that you've created an environment where anyone feels safe to share whatever's going on without retaliation, without somebody demeaning or, making fun of or belittling or even just ignoring the concern. But it also is on the side of the person that's sharing that they're willing to even open up and share. Do they feel safe enough? So it goes both ends on receiving and giving, that somebody feels like they can share something that maybe they've been taught that, hey, everything's welcome here. But also, to me and our family, it's us also creating an environment that we're not always so busy that we don't notice if a child comes in and they've got red eyes and they go straight to their room. That probably happens a lot. And if you're not paying attention because you're so busy, then if you're not go up, following the kid up to their room or saying, hey, what's going on? Can we talk? It seems like something's wrong. And opening that door so that they can feel safe to share.
Well said.
Yeah. If they just come in and go off to their room with their problems and you're dealing with yours, then they're never going to even feel open to sharing.
So now between partners, husbands and wives, partners in general, tell me a little bit about what that would look like, even being able to discuss the heavy things within, the relationship, because I've been bumping into some funny foundational issues, I think, when I've been doing quite a bit of, relationship counseling. And what I notice is there's a lot of rigidness. There's a lot of, I can't be bothered. This is your issue, not mine. Misunderstanding, a lot of control talk, which revolves around fight talk and spite talk, just trying to be forced in the opinion, right? And I really think it's kind of an interesting principle when we start looking at the emotional safety between couples.
Yeah.
Because there's always someone that feels as though they may have let that other person down, or if they are, literally, figuratively falling out of love and not knowing what to do. So it's an interesting concept because as I sit there, I think, all right, although I think that we have a very strong relationship, I also think that everyone has difficulties.
Yeah.
But what makes it different to the point where that emotional safety can still exist, even if different opinions are present?
I think it's just trial and error. It's practice and practice.
Letting go of pride, things like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And feeling open and being willing to share and, having the time. A lot of times people are just so busy and caught up in everything going on that, some of this emotional stuff, we've talked about this before, takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
We live in a household that if there's an issue, if there's a problem, sometimes we're up till midnight, 1 a.m. with each other, with the kids. even when they have school the next day, or we've got work the next day, because that's most important, and it's like, okay, well, rest up. You got to get to school tomorrow, but we have to deal with this now, instead of always putting other things as the priority, that you put your relationship, you put your emotional health and your mental health as the priority, and other things need to come next.
What about genuine forgiveness? This is a hard one, because there will be situations that I think some of our athletes and people we work with will experience where there's been something potentially a relationship damaging, right?
Yeah.
And then there's some healing process, there's some accountability, but then there's time.
Yeah.
When? How? Is it,
you never know.
How?
That's part of
forgiveness.
Your gift thing. It's going to be
gifting forgiveness.
Yeah. And it's going to have to be like the same thing. It's like time and consistency equals trust. Time and consistency sometimes equals forgiveness. And it depends on when the person's ready to gift that and say, I forgive you, and I can be, but a lot of times those two are going to go hand in hand. Yeah. Mostly if you're in a family relationship and it's not like a toxic one where you're cutting off a relationship and I can't trust you, but I forgive you, but I don't need to see you again.
Yeah.
But if it's one where you're still interacting daily, you're living together, then.
Do you think that there are times when people forgive prematurely?
Oh,
like, because it's like maybe a religious mindset, or maybe just, a conditioned response where it's like, okay, I forgive you, but really they don't.
Oh yeah. I think there's a lot of people with severe, with a lot of emotional trauma and baggage that forgive instantly because that's what they think they're supposed to do. And they've not ever learned to stand up for themselves. So they're just like, yeah, it's okay. Not a big deal. I hear that all the time. Like when somebody even apologizes, oh, it's not a big deal. Yeah, it is a big deal. If somebody apologizes to you, I don't care what situation it is, say thank you. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with clients and done this when they'll be like, oh, it's okay. No, it's not okay.
It's not okay.
You just say thank you when someone apologizes.
Yeah.
Accept that. And you may not, still trust them or forgive them, but if they're apologizing, just say thank you. That doesn't mean you forgive them, but you sure don't blow it off and say it's not a big deal.
I think that we could take a very deep dive into this principle in and of itself, right? That premature forgiveness, when really there's fear, there's anxiety, there's worry, there's hurt.
Yeah.
Right. Because if someone forgives prematurely, but then brings that issue up maybe weeks or months or years later, that person who feels or thought that they were forgiven then's like, well, hey, wait a minute, you're bringing up old stuff.
Yeah.
Even if and when we're forgiven, should we just forget? Like, no. Hey, back to square one. No, the person, I think, being forgiven needs to also understand that although that gift's been there, that heart remains fragile, correct? I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So even if they bring it up later, if there's a anger response or there's a disappointed response,
or oftentimes it's a trauma response, it's a PTSD thing. Like, even if you're like, okay, I'm working through this and I feel better about it, but a situation comes up and you're just re-traumatized.
Yeah.
You're triggered, emotionally triggered by something. Yeah. It's difficult. Even if you are trying to get past it or forgiven them for the behavior, you can't always just like erase that trauma response.
You're right.
When you're triggered.
So I like what you're saying. So you can say you could actually forgive the person, but still have emotions and feelings about that.
100%.
So if it's brought up in the future, let's say like a year or 2 years down the road, how should the person who thought that forgiveness meant never bringing it up again, how should they respond? Because I think, and I want you to do this, you and I have had this conversation and we figured it out. When I start getting heavy laden with stress, I typically withdraw. And I start to hide, I start to drop the ball. And that's when I'm more prone to making those mistakes again.
Yeah.
When you pointed that out to me years ago, where you're like, hey, slow down.
Yeah.
You're stressed. When you're stressed, this is what happens. So I'm not mad that there was a lie or a mistruth or an intent to deceive, whatever it was. You're like, slow down.
Yeah.
Now I could have taken that as, well, you said you forgave me.
Yeah.
Well,
and for the first many years when that would happen, I would have the trigger emotional response. It was a PTSD, like, oh my gosh, he's doing it again. He's, I guess
there's got to be tons more.
What else is he hiding? Or, like just even the emotional stuff of like that knot in your stomach, the drop, like, oh my gosh, what's going on? He's going to go start heading just down, straight down to the bottom again, making all these, poor choices and bad behaviors that caused so many problems years ago. And that happened for a very long time.
Yeah.
But then I noticed I had to also look at the positive side instead of just like looking at like these negative behaviors. I had to look at all the times you were doing well, that you were fine. And and then I started recognizing that it was a pattern in what you were doing because of the situation you were in.
Yeah. Well, what about this then? What about like the way that I would respond? Does that make sense? Like, so you call me out, I could get very upset and be like, how dare you bring that up again? But what if, because I think that we've done this before where I'm like, yeah, that still hurts. I remember when we had a situation in your family when we were dating and one of your siblings was like, another sibling doesn't trust Blu.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to that person, I don't blame them. I wouldn't trust me either. I've done some stupid things here. And they kind of were caught off guard. But I also have taken that mindset into life. I mean, we just celebrated 22 years of marriage.
Yeah.
And I still kind of think, if you call me to the carpet, I have to be okay with you doing that because I've earned it.
Yeah.
And I got to be okay with that. Well, and I think again, my response tells and speaks volumes, does it not?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. But it goes both ways too. I've not been perfect. You call me to the carpet.
You heard it here first, listeners.
Well,
kidding.
You guys can erase that. Yeah. But it's true. Like you'll call me out on things that I'm doing, that I'm being controlling or I'm being whatever. I'm, picking everything apart and not seeing the big picture or, there's a million things. And I have to be willing to take a look at it honestly and say, yeah, you're right. And I'm sorry, So it goes both ways.
It does go both ways. And I think there's a deeper dive that we can even take on that in the future too, because as the other part of this is then what creates resiliency in relationships? What creates kind of the ability to adopt the misfortunes or the pains, the heartaches, and apply them back into the relationship to overcome the adversity? Because I think resilience in relationships is crucial. Resilience in an addiction is obvious.
Yeah.
It's like rising from the phoenix, right? The phoenix rising from the fire.
Yeah.
And this is why it feels so good when you're early in recovery, because you feel like you are just leaving that old person behind, right?
Yeah.
And the resilience factor, relationships that can heal through adversity, I think are the power hitters of our existence. But only if they're willing to literally, figuratively, and physically turn that mess into a message.
Yeah.
Correct?
It takes time. It takes work.
There is no way on the green earth that I would have ever thought that I would be comfortable enough to even share the things that we went through in public.
Yeah.
You have an upcoming podcast with Megs out there that I haven't heard yet.
No.
And you guys spent like hours talking about our relationship.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I'm like,
egads.
Pretty honest. And
because for me, obviously the history, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
And although I know that these principles can help people, there's been times when I'm like, oh, I hope she didn't share about this part. But then it hits me and it's like, but it's okay. Because that person is not me anymore.
Yeah.
You could listen to that and you can think, wow, Blu was a POS, man. Yeah. And I was.
But I was also very clear on why you did that, which makes a huge difference on negative behaviors if you understand the why and where you're going.
So that resilience, okay, why do you think some people jump onto that solid ground of resiliency while others stay stuck in the mire? Why do you think sometimes resilience is hard for people? I think maybe the first one is because they don't know or they're worried about change.
Yeah.
Letting it go, right? What do you think of resiliency?
I think it also because it takes time. We live in a world that everything is instantaneous.
Yeah.
We want everything when we want it. We want it now. And there's so many things we can have immediately that when there's something that really takes a lot of time, it's easy to give up on. It's easy to let go of. It's easy to see something else, get distracted by something shiny in the distance and head towards that and it's also the path of least resistance. Resiliency isn't the least resistant.
No.
You know, it's the stuff that takes time, but it's also understanding, you know, like some people may think of resilience and grit as like just holding on to everything no matter what. And that's not always the case either. It's being able to assess it and say, is this healthy? Is this good? Are we working towards the same goal? Or is this abusive? Is this toxic? Am I being hurt and abused and trying to just still hold on with all my might? You have to be able to assess that, because it's not safe to stay in a situation or relationship that's extremely toxic and abusive, because you want to be resilient and you want to be the one that makes it on the other side.
I love that. I love that. Listeners, that was powerful, Marissa. Thank you. I think, like we said, resilience is the ability to adapt to life's misfortunes and recover from trauma and adversity. But what it's not is that being resilient won't make problems go away or protect you from trauma, right? It can only give you the ability to manage it. So I think we have to understand that. And I think the biggest thing in resilience in relationships after coming through addiction is to build stronger connections with friends and family members, teammates, and a foundation of support.
Yeah.
But that's going to be hard too, because you're probably going to have to be accountable to other people.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things I remember is being honest with people that I truly cared about, but I had lied to. And when I had to start making phone calls to people and say, hey, I was wrong.
Yeah.
And I need you to know this. And for them to say, hey, man, it's okay. I get it. Gene Allborn, wherever that man is, I'd love to
oh my goodness,
touch base with him, because he was the first person that I called and contacted. I
totally forgot about that.
And I said, hey, Gene was a coworker of ours. He's out there somewhere. He's got to be out there somewhere. And I said to him, hey, you're going to get a call, because I was applying for a job that required a background check. And I didn't realize they were going to go off the people that I listed safe people on this application that I know knew me
as references, and they were going to call
them. They went sideways. They called that person, then said, hey, who's someone else that you know that would? I got blindsided. I thought I was better than that.
Yeah.
But it was a gift, because it made me come out of a shell that I thought I'm hiding in. I'd forgotten about that till just now. That was, and you were there when I was making those calls.
Scary as ever. I talk about that on that podcast with Migs.
Did you remember his name?
I believe. No, because I forgot. I remembered Ron, that you had called Ron, but not Gene. And I think you had to call both of them.
I did.
And tell them the truth and things that you had been hiding.
Absolutely. I think in resilience in relationships, as they heal too, you've also got to change how you respond to situations. You know, instead of getting defensive and angry and upset to protect the heart, you've also got to look at allowing that person to feel heard and to be accountable, to look at those setbacks as opportunities for growth. Because even when we call one another out, it's not to point out a fault at all. It's about being able to see setbacks as growth. Right. One of the hardest parts, though, is developing a positive outlook. Resiliency and developing a positive outlook, that can seem hard. Because you've only been through such negative reinforcement.
Yeah. It takes time, mostly if that's all you've seen, that's all you remember and understand, is like, okay, you've got to be able to let some of that go. And if you don't have hope that it will get better, that it will be nicer, easier in times to come, then it's easier to give up. It's easier to come in with a jaded view on things. So you do have to have hope.
Maintaining healthy perspectives is huge, because if we have a perspective that the world's out to get us, that relationships won't be able to heal, guess what's going to happen? Again, perspective, it's where your eyes go, right? We just talked about this.
Where's your view?
The most important part of all of this, listeners, specifically, if you have a family system that struggled with addiction, and I'm going to preach this to the day that I die, is that you've also now become an expert in the topic. So now it's time for you to find ways and time to help others.
Yeah.
The one thing I've noticed is that when people are willing to talk about the hard stuff, like you and I, what happens? Because we disclose quite a bit of intimate detail on this podcast and in this team. And it really is to say that it's been 23 years since we've been together, 22 years married. We're still finding out things and quirks about each other.
Yeah. And I think to me, it gives others permission that they can share.
Absolutely.
It's not easy for sure. And like you say, it's embarrassing and you don't want to show off, you know, the negative sides of yourself or things that you've done wrong.
But it's human.
We're all human, and being able to share that tells other people that, hey, not everyone's not their perfect Instagram post. That's not what life is about.
Absolutely.
You know?
Well, and it's interesting, again, going back to like the podcast that I haven't heard yet and stuff, I trust you enough and I love you immensely that I know that anything you say there is not meant to damage me. Yeah. And the cool thing about it is that's my own insecurities, because everybody out there in listener land, they know me. Yeah. You know me.
Yeah.
And so talking about the growth from then, it's hard. I found, as I was cleaning out our storage room, I found my journal the other day.
Oh.
Marissa made me journal when I was going through this process. And it was funny because I knew she would read it. So at first I'm like, you know, keep things very kind of like kosher, right?
Yeah.
And then one day you and I got in an argument and I let you have it in the journal.
Yeah.
And through that process, I'm like, oh, I can kind of see how she sees this.
Yeah.
And I got this weird feeling when I was reading this, because I put me right back in there, but I'm like, holy cow, light years away from where that was.
Yeah.
Like that person that was writing those, that person hurt.
Yeah.
And I was trying to hold on to all this at the same time, trying to juggle while I was on fire and drowning.
Yeah. And blame and shift. And yeah, it's hard.
And I wrote in there the time that I had the aha moment when you and I were in the parking lot at the Provo Mall and my mom was trying to call me. I wrote about that in there.
Yeah.
And then I wrote about my graduation. And I found the graduation video. And I'm like, oh, so I thought it's like a double whammy, not just reading it, but then seeing it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my gosh. When I was watching my graduation video and you're filming it.
Yeah.
And my mom, who said, you know, she could be there, wasn't.
Yeah.
Hearing my name on the intercom, watching myself walk across that stage, that was crazy.
Yeah. Getting a master's degree, the first in your family, to graduate from high school, let alone college.
So that perspective was huge. So, you know, this stuff happens for a reason. I have zero excuses to be an addict now. Zero.
Yeah.
You know, I've got great reasons, but I don't have any excuses.
Yeah.
And so my biggest, I think, I don't know, misnomer for why relationships fail is because they stop talking to each other.
Yeah.
They stop healing together. They are in that constant stage 2 of falling out of love.
Yeah. Well, and that ego, that pride is huge. You know, and again, some people think, oh, pride is just feeling like you're just the greatest and you're the best. No, there's also pride in just your ego and just trying to hold on to things.
I'm glad you said
and
that.
not see it how it really is, because you know better than anyone else who you are, good, bad, ugly, the best, or indifferent. If you're just holding on so tight, it's dangerous.
Listeners, I'm so glad Marissa brought that up, because that is kind of the answer to something I've been thinking about. Is you and I have talked about this from time to time, and it's why did this work with me and you? Why is this working?
Yeah,
it's because we both let go of pride.
Yeah, I mean, always no. Don't get me wrong,
but not
we still have the issues,
Marissa. But not there's just positive pride.
Yeah.
Negative pride too, because me saying I know I'm a garbage person because I came from a garbage background.
Yeah.
So I don't deserve the best of anything, that I'm just a scum. That's also pride.
Absolutely.
I was telling God, I know you made a mistake with me. I don't belong here.
And
that's
I know
pride.
more than you. Yeah.
And so it's kind of an interesting thing. Listeners, if you're in a situation, you need to put where we're talking about with this husband and wife partners, you got to check your pride.
Yeah. Where's your ego at? What is it holding on to?
Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest indicators of non-change or growth is pride.
Oh,
I think we could do a
100%.
very deep dive specifically on that, because there are times when we're in a disagreement and one of us will say, all right, I'm throwing in the towel here. This is my folly. This is my fault. I'm stuck.
Yeah.
And that's not easy to do. You've done it. I've done it.
And there's times it's hours, sometimes a couple
Sometimes
days
days.
that we hold on to it and just stonewall, and we're, ignore each other while we work through it. But
and I'll be honest with you, it always breaks my heart when you do it first, because I'm like, God, Blu, knock it off, man.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, it hurts.
You do it first more than
well, I'm usually doing the dumb things. Let's be honest. So it's kind of my fault.
Let's be real. Right?
Yeah. But I think it's cool. So listeners, that last part of being able to share this with people, you become the expert. That's why when we get into addictions, substance abuse, pornography, those things shouldn't be hidden. It's okay to talk about.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have another person, another family member, another friendship, an acquaintance, a neighbor that's going to be like, yeah, we're having problems, struggling with pornography.
If you feel like there's not anyone you can talk to about it, find somebody. And maybe that's a therapist. Maybe that's
a teammate,
a ecclesiastical leader, a teammate. Like it's so important for you to talk to someone about it, because there's probably a ton of relationships that are not emotionally safe that you can feel like you can open up to and talk to about it, but you need to talk to someone.
Absolutely. And that it's never an easy thing. It's just not. And, relationships that go through these kind of adversities, if you allow them to heal, they become stronger at the breaking point. And I think we do live in a world where everything happens behind closed doors. And when you allow people in, you are exposing and risking the potential for judgment. But oh well, because the people that judge me now, that's totally fine. I'm okay with that. Because as long as I know that I'm okay with my wife and with my children,
people you trust,
people that people that I love and I invest in, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Because
again, like you're saying, you're worried about a little bit about this podcast. If somebody hears the podcast and doesn't hear the whole story, because you can share something and somebody will always hear one piece of what you said. That's their loss. That's on them, that their tunnel vision and what they're seeing and how they're judging. And there's nothing you can do to change that.
Their ignorance.
Yeah. And so you have to be able to let that go.
Now, the coolest thing about that too, listeners, is when you are in that process of growth, and it takes an abundant amount of time. And I think that if we can forgive ourselves and allow others to forgive us, that doesn't mean that it never gets to be brought up and talked about again, and I really want to reiterate that, because we've earned that. We've earned the title of like being checked on, or being, being addressed. Does that make sense? And I know sometimes, you forgive and forget. I don't think we should ever forget. I don't think we should ever, ever, ever forget.
Yeah.
Because I think forgiving and forgetting are two very different things, correct?
Absolutely.
Because there's still the potential there. I mean, it's one of these things that I'm grateful for. And that's because Marissa is such an inquisitor, right? It's hard for me to it would be hard for me to manipulate this kind of stuff. And so things like potential risks and downfall, and it may be funny to even say this stuff out loud, but 22 years ago when we got married, we didn't have some of the same potential pitfalls, pornography and instant access to things, because we didn't have that stuff. We didn't have the cell phones and whatnot. In fact, we were watching a funny little clip from Steve Jobs introducing the first iPhone, and he was like, you can pinch and widen the picture. And we're like, whoa. It was kind of funny, because it's like when that happened, it changed everything.
Yeah. And some good and some bad.
But the cool thing about that is from day one, since technology's been here, there's been open access to everything. Marissa has access to all my stuff. And like Skeletor said in that TikTok meme, an empty browser is just as guilty as a full one, right? And so I am thankful for that kind of stuff because she checks on it. And so if you're in a situation where you become afraid to check on your loved one, we have a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, how hard is that? Like when, like when you feel something and you've got to talk to me about it, I'm sure it's not like, well, this is going to be fun. You're like, oh, great. Here it comes.
Yeah.
What's this going to be? It's kind of funny too, because this has happened to see it in this recent week where it's even things that are miscommunication and just my mindset to yours. It's like, did you send Josh the leave no man behind logos? And I'm like, yeah,
texting him right now.
I did. Oh, hey, Josh. And I'm like, yeah, I did. And she's like, well, I sent it to him yesterday and we're already doing it. I'm like, I sent it to him and I showed her, but it was like that day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh crap. Yeah. Like you wanted it right then and there.
Well, because I swear you said you did that.
See, and
right then.
And here's a whole nother podcast we can talk about. What happens when a spouse or a significant other struggles with some kind of mental disability or illness, like Coach Blu and ADHD, or a spouse that has depression or anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Because if you have a spouse that suffers from something like that and you don't, are you really like in tune with like it's his ADHD? Or, or can, because we were talking about this, I was showing you some stuff about spouses with ADHD.
Yeah.
And you were kind of laughing. I'm like, look at this. I got to talk about this. And you're like, you do that. I'm like, what? I do? Huh?
Oh yeah.
What was it? Do you remember what it was? It was something funny. And I'm like, it was something hilarious.
Well,
and I'm like,
there's the one that you said about when we're not around each other. Do I think that you forget about me or do you miss me or something? I'm like, no, you don't miss me.
And I'm like, yes, and they're like, I do. But then I'm like, oh, maybe.
But his ADHD, and this is with most people with ADHD, something I've learned, it's taken a time to understand.
Absolutely.
Is something you don't see. It's like it doesn't exist. So things that are behind the kitchen cupboard aren't there. That's why we throw away a lot of food in our fridge, because once it goes in the fridge, we have half of our household with a lot of ADHD forget it's there, and then it rots and it's thrown away. So unless there's some, so that's like, it does. Sadly, it goes the same with people. If I'm not here and around you, if I'm gone, you're hyper focused on the next thing. So yeah, you forget that I'm exist for a little.
Is that why we have like 95 rolls of electrical tape floating around this house?
Or more.
Yeah. See, and so it's an interesting principle. In fact, we should probably do a deep dive on that sometime too, about being able to understand when a spouse struggles with some kind of
because it's help. Because again,
disorder.
For the longest time, I just thought you didn't care. Like when you're gone, when you're at work or you're doing other things, like I think about you throughout the day. I'll send you texts throughout the day. You don't.
That's so funny.
You rarely do.
You know what?
And I think, is it because he's so busy and I'm not? Is it because I miss him and he doesn't miss me? And yeah, for a long time, I felt bad and that, that hurts, but that's not the case. And being able to understand it, that you absolutely do love and miss me makes it's such a big relief. But it's so just how you show it versus how I show it.
So
it doesn't mean that one's better than the other at all.
It's so interesting you said that, because I've worked with couples who do that frequently throughout the day, like 5-6 times. And I'm like, why? Like, why are you doing that? Like, that seems like enmeshment. It's not. That's probably just real relationship.
In some ways. Again, it's just how some people do it. Yeah, I'll text you and you reply, but you rarely text me throughout the day.
That is funny. Well, okay, we always have room for improvement, and that's what it's about, right?
But again, maybe you need me to improve and just leave you alone during work so you can focus. So it doesn't have to just be one way. It's understanding.
See, now the only reason we came to that is because we communicate, and that's what it's all about at the ground level, correct?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh, listeners, you've been well fed. I enjoy these kind of things. It's like always a kind of exposing a little bit more about us. These people are probably like, okay, you two, like, we get to answer the questions. But it's a significant thing. Being able to have resilience in relationships after adversity is crucial. And it's what kind of bonds you together. And we are firm believers that we don't simply just grow old together. We heal together.
Absolutely.
And when you look at it through those lenses, you can kind of see that we're all kind of damaged and hurt in our own way, but together we can make it stronger.
Yeah.
It's the old Meet Joe Black conversation that I love so much at the very end of that movie, where he's like, how do you know that that person, is in it for the long run? He says, because Joe, my wife knows everything about me. She knows all the good and all of the bad, and it's okay.
Yeah.
I think that's why that movie stands out so much to me, is because there's so many reasons throughout that movie to not care about either one of those main characters.
Yeah.
But it's because of the knowledge of everything that's good and everything that's bad, and still choosing in.
Yeah.
That is real love in my eyes.
Yeah. And that came out when we were going through that. We were deciding those big questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I saw that at the movie theater by myself. How weird is that? Like this funny love story. And I'm like, this is really cool. I like this.
Go watch Meet Joe.
Go watch it. It's actually kind of that's a remake too. There's an older version of that.
Oh,
it's like Mr.
I've always thought it was
Mr.
weird,
Death
but Blue
or
loves
something.
it, and he learned a lot. So
I made the kids watch it, and they're like, "Huh."
They liked it too, and I'm still like, there's so many things that I'm like, it's weird. I don't know if
you
I
have
like it.
You have a cold heart. I'm kidding.
Rock, solid black heart.
That's so funny. Meet Joe Black. Meet Mrs. Blackheart. So funny. You've been well fed, listeners. I hope that this helps. Please share this with anybody that might be struggling with any kind of relationship issues. If you need further help, Coach Blu is available. Licensed mental health therapist, addictions counselor. You can get a hold of us through the website, addict2athlete.org. You'll also find all of our content on there, our podcasts, everything in between. We've got lots of content on there. We have a team store.
Yes, we do.
Going to be injecting quite a bit of new stuff. Hopefully to get some things printed pre-hand so that it'll get to you faster.
Addict2athlete.org. Check out our team store. There's a lot of good stuff.
There really is. I want to thank Radio Ronin, the Radio Ronin Network, for all that they do for Team Addict Athlete. Go check out the other podcasts on there. There's some good ones. I think if you listen to the Radio Ronin Network's podcast, you're going to have quite some entertainment from food reviews, some music, pop culture, to some paranormal stuff. Right down to reflective podcasts, much like we do with like overcoming adversities and just taking a different way to look at life. So go check out Radio Ronin Network. And athletes, as always, until next time, please go turn that mess of addiction into the message of sobriety. It'll help you reach some cool places.